A kitchen built on impossible dreams. Some stories begin with ambition. Others begin with desperation. But this one began with a dream so unlikely, so wildly out of reach, that even those who believed in miracles hesitated to speak it aloud. It belonged to a chef who dared to imagine a restaurant that shouldn't have been possible. A place built not on resources or reputation, but on sheer, stubborn hope. In a world where successful restaurants often rely on wealthy backers, established names, or celebrated pedigrees, this chef had none of those advantages. He came from a small town overlooked by maps, raised in a family where survival mattered more than artistry. His earliest memories weren't of tasting menus or fine dining. They were of turning scarcity into sustenance, of stretching ingredients into meals that carried dignity despite their simplicity. Cooking wasn't glamour. It was necessity. Yet somewhere along the way, a spark took hold. He began to dream, not of fame, but creating a space where food could uplift, inspire, and rewrite the story of a life that seemed destined for limits. He imagined a kitchen where creativity wasn't constrained by background or circumstance, where every dish carried the spirit of possibility. It sounded foolish, impossible, but the dream refused to let him go. When he moved to the city, reality struck hard. Rent was unforgiving, jobs were scarce, and kitchens, competitive as battlegrounds, had little patience for outsiders with unconventional ideas. Still, he persisted, working double shifts, saving scraps of his paycheck, scribbling recipes in the margins of a worn notebook. Every obstacle only sharpened his resolve. He found an abandoned storefront, a former tailor shop with peeling paint and a leaky ceiling. Most saw decay. He saw a beginning. He signed the lease with trembling hands, aware that he had just tied his future to a building no one believed could hold a restaurant. As he cleaned the dusty floors at midnight, his reflection wavering in the cracked windows, he felt a wave of doubt wash over him. Could a dream survive in a place built on struggle? Could hope truly transform into something real? Yet beneath the uncertainty, something powerful stirred, an unshakable belief that impossible dreams are simply dreams that haven't been proven yet. And with that conviction, he lit the stove for the very first time, unaware that the flame he sparked would soon ignite a story far greater than his own. The early days were grueling. The chef worked alone, scraping old plaster from the walls by day and testing recipes on a borrowed hot plate by night. The kitchen was barely a kitchen, just a narrow space with mismatched equipment scavenged from closing restaurants and charity auctions. But he treated every inch of it as sacred ground. Each dented pot, each uneven counter felt like a step toward a future he was determined to build with his own hands. Slowly, a few believers joined him. A former dishwasher with a soft-spoken brilliance for seasoning. A pastry apprentice who had been rejected by every prestigious kitchen, but carried a fire no rejection could extinguish. A server who couldn't explain why she felt compelled to stay, except that she sensed something extraordinary forming behind those cracked walls. Together, they became the fragile heartbeat of the restaurant. But belief did not pay bills. Weeks passed with barely enough customers to keep the lights on. Suppliers doubted they would last a month. At night, the chef sat alone, staring at invoices stacked like warning signs. The dream felt enormous. His resources felt impossibly small. Every day became a negotiation between courage and fear. Yet the dishes he crafted whispered a different truth. They carried flavors from his childhood, meals built from scarcity but transformed with creativity. But he didn't replicate those dishes exactly. Instead, he elevated them, pushing humble ingredients into forms that expressed reverence rather than nostalgia. His menu was a love letter to where he came from, written with a confidence he hadn't realized he possessed. Still, the city barely noticed, until one slow evening, as rain pattered against the windows, a local blogger wandered inside. They were drawn not by reviews, but by the warm light spilling onto the empty street. They ordered several dishes, tasting each one in thoughtful silence. Before leaving, they looked at the chef with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Part curiosity, part wonder. The next morning, the blog post appeared. It wasn't grand or poetic. It simply said, "There's a tiny restaurant on a forgotten street cooking food that shouldn't be this good. I don't know how they're surviving, but I hope they do." The post spread quietly, then quickly, more guests came. Then more. Regulars began forming. Yet with rising attention came rising expectations. The staff felt the pressure tighten. Mistakes carried heavier consequences. The fragile balance of hope and survival teetered with every service. And beneath the excitement, a new tension emerged, one that would soon test the limits of the dream they had built together. The restaurant's growing momentum brought both thrill and danger. What once felt like a sanctuary of shared purpose now pulsed with the strain of rising expectations. The dining room filled faster than the kitchen could keep up. Lines formed outside before sunset. Praise poured in from every direction. But behind the swinging door, exhaustion settled like a second skin. The chef pushed himself harder, convinced that their fragile success could vanish at any moment. Still, the dishes remained extraordinary. They carried the soul of the chef's past and the spark of his imagination. But with each new guest, the emotional weight behind those flavors grew heavier. People arrived expecting transformation, revelation, healing. They weren't just hungry, they were searching for meaning. And the kitchen, once a place of creativity, began to feel like a stage where every misstep could unravel the future they had fought to build. Then came an opportunity the chef had never imagined. A renowned investor, a figure known for building empires out of struggling restaurants, requested a private meeting. Their offer was astonishing. Expand the restaurant, replicate its concept in major cities, turn this fragile dream into a global brand. The team celebrated. They imagined security, growth, a future without fear of bills or burnout. But the chef felt a quiet tremor of unease. Scaling meant consistency. Consistency meant compromise. And compromise might erase the very heart of what made this place special. The dishes were built from personal history, from the scent of his childhood kitchen, from the resourcefulness that had shaped him. How could those memories be mass-produced? How could a dream born from scarcity survive in the hands of wealth? While he wrestled with the decision, the pressure inside the kitchen reached a breaking point. One night, during an overwhelming service, a miscommunication led to a critical mistake on a signature dish. The chef snapped, his voice sharp, his frustration unfiltered. The young pastry apprentice fled the kitchen in tears. The dishwasher stared at him with a disappointment, so deep it felt like a wound. Later, as the dining room emptied and the exhaustion settled into silence, the chef walked through the dimly lit space that once felt like hope incarnate. The cracked walls, the mismatched pots, the uneven counters, these had been symbols of possibility. Now they felt like reminders of what he stood to lose. He realized that the dream he built was no longer just his. It belonged to the people who sacrificed with him. It belonged to the guests who found comfort in his flavors. It belonged to every struggle that had shaped its unlikely rise. But the question remained, looming like a shadow across the kitchen floor. Would accepting the offer strengthen the dream, or destroy the very soul that had brought it to life? The next morning arrived with a heavy stillness. The chef stood alone in the quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room. The investor's contract lay on the counter, pristine and full of promises, stability, growth, and a future free from a constant fear of collapse. It should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like a crossroads carved straight through his heart. He thought about the people who had stood beside him since the beginning. The dishwasher whose instincts elevated humble ingredients into revelations. The pastry apprentice, still finding her voice but brimming with potential. The server who transformed every guest experience through kindness and care. They hadn't joined him for fame or fortune. They joined because they believed in the impossible. They built this kitchen with their exhaustion, their hope, their unwavering loyalty. Could he ask them to abandon the intimacy of what they had created for a corporate vision of expansion? When the team gathered later that day, the chef did something unexpected. He apologized, openly, honestly, for letting pressure twist his dream into something that caused him pain. He acknowledged the cracks in their foundation, the unspoken fears, the nights when the weight of expectation had been too much. And then he told them the truth. He wasn't sure whether saying yes to the investor would save them or erase the heart of everything they had built. The room fell quiet. Then the dishwasher stepped forward. He reminded the chef of why they had joined him in the first place. Not for success, but for belief. The pastry apprentice, her voice still trembling from the previous night, said she didn't want to replicate desserts in distant cities. She wanted to grow here, where the dream had roots. The server simply said that expansion might build an empire, but staying small might build a legacy. Their words hit him with unexpected clarity. He realized the investor's offer wasn't a lifeline. It was a test, a chance to decide what mattered most. The dream had never been about scale. It had been about proving that beauty could bloom in unlikely places, that limitations could become strengths, that a kitchen held together by hope could create something extraordinary. He declined the offer. The investor left, bewildered but respectful. And that night, the team cooked with a renewed sense of purpose, lighter, steadier, united in a way they hadn't felt in months. The guests felt it too. The dishes carried a warmth they hadn't tasted in a long time, as if the food itself understood the decision that had been made. Weeks later, the restaurant received an unexpected honor, a feature in a prestigious culinary magazine celebrating establishments that chose integrity over expansion. They called it the little kitchen with the biggest heart. Reservations booked out for months. People traveled not for spectacle, but for sincerity. The chef understood finally that impossible dreams don't require perfection or scale. They require courage. The courage to stay true when the world offers you an easier path. And in the glow of the humble dining room, surrounded by the team that had become his family, he realized that the dream was no longer impossible. It was alive. Subscribe to join the journey.